order. I don't think we have any excused absences, so I think two of our, what's that? Oh, yeah, well, two of our colleagues will join us shortly. So we have the minutes before us and with the corrected October minutes, so thank you for that. Any updates to the December minutes? May I have a motion to approve? Daryl, is there a second? Okay, David, all in favor? Any opposition? None? Public comment? Any either, no one signed up. All right. Okay, White. Okay.
First, I would like to start off introducing Dwight Hopwell from the Planning Commission, who has recently been named the liaison to the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission. Appreciate Mr. Hopwell attending here today, and we'll be looking forward to coordinating with him. Nicola Hill is the SMAC liaison with the Planning Commission, so we'll make sure that those connections are made on an ongoing basis to help facilitate discussions between SMAC and the Planning Commission, especially related to rezoning cases that may have stormwater implications.
Thank you. Thank you all. I look forward to working together, and I probably won't be making any in-person meetings, but I look forward to mentioning a few virtual ones and being here when I need to. So I'll be around afterwards to chat.
Excellent. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Jumped over Nicola. Do you have any updates?
So I think Ben might have a quick update on that one since from the previous one presented in December, which I was not part of, but the main one was just welcoming Dwight here as well. We'll have a liaison position.
Yeah, so no real update on the first two, which we talked about. One was on Gorman Street and the other was on Trelwood Road in Southwest Raleigh. But just as a reminder, the Gorman Street one is this rezoning here on Gorman Street, sort of behind that Food Line Shopping Center, South David Ferry Road. And they are on track to for it to be discussed at the January 23rd Growth and Natural Resources Council Committee meeting. So that'll be discussed at that meeting. And they have, if you recall from the December meeting, they have put conditions down to stay out of the floodplain, but there's still concerns about it being putting housing this close to the floodplain in sort of lot. And PEJ, the Partners for Environmental Justice, they have come out against it, but I don't know if that has changed, if there's been discussions with them and the applicant or anything like that. So that's the same schedule as we had in December. The second one at the council table was at 1011 Trelwood Drive, which is pretty much a couple blocks away from that one we just talked about, up Aiken Ferry Road. Aiken Ferry Road to the north there, and Trelwood is going north-south. This is the one where they were staying out of the majority of the floodplain, and they were going to go through the code allowances to disturb the floodplain with no impact to the flood levels in Walnut Creek. It's kind of their goal, and they've been discussing with Councilor Harrison meeting a lot this past 4 days, as Wayne and I have been copied on emails for that. As far as conditions, they do have a GSI condition as well for this site, and that'll actually be discussed at the January 16th council meeting, which that was the same schedule we had in December to talk about it. So that's not going to a council meeting, but going to another council meeting in less than 2 weeks. And then the only schedule change was the one for Falls Lake that was on Strickland Road. This was the area behind the Harris Senior Shopping Center off of Strickland and Leesville Road. This went to Planning Commission in December after the SMAC meeting, but it immediately got referred to the Planning Commission Committee of the Whole, which is usually meets on the fourth Tuesday of every month. And I took that language off our website because they have not set the exact meeting time as of yet. So that should be on that January fourth Tuesday agenda of the Planning Commission Committee of the Whole. And I apologize for missing one poll. I'm just now seeing Not the usual way, leaving off the W, but I, boy, I would have just spelled that apparently. So. That's really a scheduling update there. So the planning commission didn't even discuss it at their December meeting. They just automatically referred to the people. So I assume there'll be robust discussion. Any questions?
So man, I remember in December you made some comments because you were very familiar with this this project. Do you have any follow-up? I know you're saying that there's some erosion, I think, on the southern end. So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been out there again since my initial site visit with some of the locals in the neighborhood who were concerned. I was out there with Councilwoman Harrison as well. And we did know that there was a lot of really visible kind of scouring and erosion that looked like it's coming off of the next door shopping mart. So we just noted that there's already some stormwater considerations that are on site. And so just thinking about that in terms of, cumulative impacts for adding more impervious there. But I know that's part of the discussion they're having with the planning commission right now, so.
This is also that case that I believe in the past rezoning, they were talking about accessing it through this neighborhood street, but that might be part of it now. There's not a site plan to the rezoning, but now there's talk of them accessing the site off of Strickland Road there. So.
And I know for the neighbors, that was another major consideration was the traffic impacts and the lack of accessibility to the adjacent neighborhood because of the lack of a road in the northern.
Yep.
Anything else?
There was a council meeting on Tuesday, but there were no exciting stormwater rezoning cases talked about them. So.
Right. And again, I know Wayne, welcome to Dwight. Want to extend a welcome to Dwight. Your presence here means a lot and look forward to increasing communication between our two commissions. Back to you, Wayne.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I do have a couple of staff report updates of folks that have joined the stormwater team recently. First, I'd like to introduce Tonka Wilkins, who is here today as our new administrative support supervisor. In the business services unit. Tonka comes to us from Raleigh Water Public Utilities. It brings over 15 years of customer service and significant supervisory experience. In Raleigh Water, Tonka worked as the customer service supervisor, managing customer service unit, providing essential customer service. In her new role with Raleigh Stormwater, she will supervise the administrative support team, oversee administrative support operations, and provide administrative support to the division and to SMAC as well. So welcome, by that. Also here today, another new member of the Stormwater team, Ross Keith, has joined the plan review team as a senior engineer. Ross has a master's degree in environmental physics, started his career as a stormwater operations manager in charge of designing, operating, and managing all aspects related to the movement of stormwater for a special taxing district in South Florida. They really have some stormwater issues in South Florida, I know. He then moved to a local water and wastewater utility, overseeing day-to-day operations. He also brings experience in the construction and carpentry industry, as well as serving a short period as a public school teacher. So welcome, Ross. Glad to have you on our team. And a couple of other brief items of note. First, I would like to update the commission that pending the forecasted rain events on this coming Saturday and Tuesday, our team has started lowering Lake Johnson levels. That started yesterday about lunchtime. And so we're lowering those levels to provide additional storage capacity that will help buffer the storm event impacts downstream on Walnut Creek. So we plan to continuing lowering until about lunchtime tomorrow, and then we'll assess the condition then. But tentatively right now, we plan to stop that lowering tomorrow. And that will then give time for that additional flow to pass through Walnut Creek before the rainfall does start on Saturday. So that's the plan. Look for Mr. Bryant's interview on WRAL News tonight to get more of an update on that.
And when did you start, Lauren?
We started about noon yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, so like 3 feet next.
Yeah, we'll probably shoot for between 2.5 and 3 feet total already. Another exciting update, the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Policy, which the commission has been briefed on a number of times, and which staff has been working on for at least a couple of years, even further than that. It has officially been signed by the city manager's office, so we're very excited about that. As a brief recall, what that policy does is it commits that any city capital improvements project that has land disturbing activities will be evaluated very early in the design process for the implementation of GSI. And as it's appropriate, stormwater staff will help implement that, in some cases provide supplemental funding to provide green stormwater infrastructure, and then take over the maintenance of that GSI once it's constructed. So this is really a key element of our lead by example portion of the overall GSI plan that we've been working on for a couple of years. So that's an exciting milestone for us as well. And another brief update here, we are in the throes of the fiscal year 25 budgeting process. So we've been starting to meet internally. We're updating our rate model, updating our capital improvements plan. And we will be coming back to the commission over the next 2 meetings. First in February to give you an overview of the process, a reminder of the process, give you some preview, especially of the capital improvements plan projects that are being proposed. And then come back again in March with a little bit more details on the proposal for the rate increases that we would take to council in March afterwards. So that's just a little preview of coming attractions. The next 2 meetings will both have presentations on the budget process. So that's an exciting time for us as well. And just a note, there is a Raleigh Rainwater Rewards quarterly update in your package. As we typically try to do, there is a Raleigh Rainwater Rewards presentation today. So if you do have any questions on that package, Justin and Stephen are here and can answer any questions as part of their presentation. Will be coming in shortly. And then last but not least, I do want to announce the Western North Ridge Stormwater Systems Improvement Project. We'll be starting construction here very shortly. It's we've issued the notice to proceed. You may recall this was a project that was actually bid almost a year ago. We had some bid anomalies in that the low bidder was pulled out of the bid after the bid was submitted. And there was a slight delay from the time that they pulled out. And then we went to the second low bidder and they said, yes, we will do the project, but we have won a project that we didn't know about since the time that we submitted your bid. So we will have to delay our award or our start of construction, right? So we weighed rebidding it versus going ahead and taking what we thought was a pretty good price and decided to allow them to delay their start in order to lock in that price, which they agreed to do. So we're to the point now where they're ready to get started. So I didn't want to announce that, and still a very good price given everything that's happened in the last almost year. So that construction will begin here very shortly. That's all I had. Glad to take any other questions anyone might have.
Any questions for one? Okay. So now we'll hear the Rainwater Rewards project for review.
Great. All right, well, first things first, I know you all received the quarterly update memo. So I wanted to ask if there's any questions that I need to attempt to answer. Identify after that review. Right. Moving on. So today we have 4 rain gardens, one of which was eligible for the 100% reimbursement. So we'll get into that. I'll try to move as quickly as possible. Here's a breakdown of the rankings of these rain gardens based off the price per pound of nitrogen removed over the year. This is based off the entire lifetime of this program. Give a forewarning of some of the numbers you'll be able to see later. Also, this is the rain garden maintenance requirements, just another review that we require as part of the agreement if a project is approved. All right, first one is 2505 Sugar Maple Court, located in Perry Creek. Therefore, it's 90% eligible for reimbursement. It's a 115 square foot rain garden. Basic project design is it captures the front portion of their house. Treat approximately 1,096 square feet impervious surface. Here's a general location of where it's going to be located. They also agreed to put a sign up, so there's an emphasis on this program. The 2 photos to the left, the top one shows where downspout is going, and the bottom left is a little confusing, but that's basically a former pathway of their drainage going right into our right of way. They put up some cinder block to kind of dissipate that. So instead of this erosion and this problem that's been happening at their property, scouring out their yard, instead it's going to go to a rain garden. So I think it's going to help both their goals and our goals. Here's a project cost breakdown. So total cost is $9,966. Stormwater at 90% is $8,970. Based off their accepted quote. Some breakdowns will include an under drain because of the drainage infiltration rate. Here's some of the breakdown of the numbers, lead removal rate versus total cost. As you can see, total suspended solids and total nitrogen. Here's that number you saw on that chart below, and this is over the life of the project, a 10-year maintenance period. Any questions with Sugar Maple Court?
Any questions, we'll do these individually.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, just to read it right there. Currently dumping into the right of way, they had some various problems. They're gonna do a rain garden on their property, fully within their property, and over top, they went in a extreme storm condition, but
Yeah,
it's gonna improve the day-to-day work.
yeah. These rain gardens are designed for 1 inch of rain. That's their design scale. So anything past 1 inch of rain, if designed perfectly, will overtop or overspill into the right of ways.
I did the math kind of quickly with these, I know 66K left, it's around 30K, so.
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point. I had my numbers ready. With this program, with the main CIP budget, not the ARPA 100% eligibility, we're looking around $66,000. And after this, if all are approved, we're looking around 33,000 roughly. But we do have the option to take up to 50K, I believe it is, through an administrative action to kind of cover costs in the interim till July, in which that new budget will.
That's an additional 50K or the 33 up to 50K?
It's up to 50K based off an administrative action.
That'd be an 83. Basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
and really it would just be probably just to cover. Yeah, right. So, and, you know, Wayne and Justin and I can explore that if needed.
Okay. We have a motion to approve. Okay, Samantha, second, all in favor? Very good.
I appreciate that. All right, next one is 604 East Cabarrus Street. That's in Walnut Creek. This is the 100% eligibility project. Another small rain garden at 118 square feet. It's actually 2 rain gardens. one located in the back and one in the front. As you can see, the design, one's kind of a linear feature along their driveway, and one is in top left of their property in the back of the house. But for a total of 118 square feet. These projects basically show the locations of the rain garden. The one on the left is in the top left. And this is kind of a sideways photo. I apologize, but it's a photo of where the linear type feature will occur. We did speak to them about having an additional, defined berm to stop any sort of feature flow from the neighbor's driveway. All right, here's a project cost breakdown. Once again, as you can see, just a reminder, the 100% eligibility they submitted an application for and was approved. Here's project cost breakdown. Here are the fluid renewal rates versus total cost. This was a good example too. The original quote reached and exceeded our cap, 7,000 pounds per pound of nitrogen removed. And so we negotiated them to basically say, hey, you need to either reduce costs or you're not eligible for the full amount, even at 100%. And so they were able to negotiate with their contractor a lower bid, roughly like 15, I think it was 15,000 down to 11,000. Any questions with East Cabarrus Street?
No, it complicates things a lot, but having the berm in between the driveway. Is there any consideration of maybe them joining forces?
Yeah, we often explore that or at least communicate that with property owners. It is complicated because of the legal agreement. And to be honest, I tend to lean away from it when talking with homeowners. Justin might be able to speak to it. I know there's been a few instances of projects where two property owners have gone in with the same legal agreement. We have the method to do that, but it's not typical. And like I said, we tend to stay away from it just because of these recurring maintenance requirements and tracking people down. It's already complicated enough. So, any other questions?
Motion to approve. Luann, there's second. Josh, all in favor? Very good.
All right, appreciate it. Next up is 1000 Ravenwood Drive, located in the Simmons branch, kind of the west end of town. This is the 75% zone. This is a 200 square foot ring garden. Project design, once again, 200 square feet to treat roughly 2,072 square feet of rooftop. This project was another good example of kind of renegotiating because their original design was sloped downhill. You can see the contour lines, and we asked them just to try to identify or to place this rain garden more on the flatter portion of their front yard. You'll see some of the photos. So as you can see, this is roughly where the location of the rain garden will be. And it will be more on this flat end right there versus trying to build up the back end or downslope end as their original design had. But great feature, once again, very public. And all of these designs agreed to put our signage in. So it's a good promotional, this whole round of projects are good promotional rain gardens. Here's cost breakdown, 19,574, 75% is 14,681. Once again, cost to the left based off the estimate that was approved. Or excuse me, submitted. Here are the breakdown of costs versus polluted renewal rates. Once again, very similar to the others, but much higher total suspense solves because of the design. Any questions with Ravenwood?
Just a random technical question. What about the design makes it so much better with the TSS?
Well, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is the drainage area that's going to it. So you calculate that. there's, smaller gardens. But I do believe though, the simple method doesn't necessarily take into account land type. I think it's all based off impervious surface. I mean, land type is in like impervious or non-impervious versus like a gravel and that's, so it's a basic calculation.
Size base.
Yeah, and that's my best estimate. I'm not a professional on the planning side, but. Yeah, no problem.
Motion to approve. Samantha, second. Sarah, all in favor? Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Last one here, 4516 Oak Park Road, Northwest Raleigh. It's located in the large Crabtree Creek on the northwest end of it. 75% zoned, another 200 square foot. All right, and this one captures both their rooftop and their overhead, or excuse me, their covered deck patio. It's a rain garden located in the front of their house. So as this photo roughly gives the location of where the rain garden will be away from those trees. And then a lot of these photos are identifying downspouts and general areas of their house that will be piped. It will be capturing that, excuse me, it wasn't covered. It will be capturing the patio based off a small catchment that everything flows to. It's hard to see with that photo, but it's to the bottom left of that photo and then piped towards the front. So once again, this is another one that's very public, right against the street. We highly encourage them to put signage out. So we're pretty excited about that. Here are the estimated costs based off their estimate, $15,000, 75%, $11,250. Here are the cost breakdowns again. It's very similar to the other one, as far as the total suspended solids. All right, last one. Any questions with Oak Park?
We have a motion to approve. Carol, second. Elaine, all in favor? Very good. Thanks so much, Steve.
All right, you're welcome. Appreciate it.
You got that out?
Good afternoon. All right. So I'm back to talk about the design manual again. We're going to talk about the status. We're going to go over some additional changes that have been made, some notable outstanding comments, and then the schedule. So in terms of status, what we're calling version 4, which is the red line draft. You were emailed about that going up on the website. That's available to anyone on the website. We are working on draft V5. That draft will be the one that goes out for official public comment. I'm going to talk about some changes that we are making in that. The biggest changes are going to be formatting and correcting typos and that sort of thing. But we anticipate that going on the website probably around the end of January, but then being available as this goes to city council, as this goes to planning commission, being the version that the public is commenting on. And at the end, I'm going to talk about next steps, but I did want to clarify that what we are asking of SMAC is that you endorse a request to council to authorize a change, not that you endorse specific technical content of the manual. So I wanted to make that clarification. All right, so, one of the changes that we've made since the version you saw at our December meeting is that we have added a definition of public runoff, and this came up, we didn't originally have this in here. We needed to add it because it gets into the requirements surrounding the new stormwater conveyance permit and where different types of inspections would have to be performed. It also gets into who is responsible for maintaining certain pipes and where we require public city drainage easements. And so we've clarified that that is public runoff is runoff that comes from a public road or street right of way. So whether it be NCDOT or city, but not say a privately owned road, which there's there's some existing ones in the city. And then we clarified that it's parcels owned by the city of Raleigh. So if there was, let's say there's a city park next to your property and there's pipes that come from that park, those would be considered to be carrying public runoff and would be the city would have a role in maintaining those. We put in this definition after checking with some folks that we aren't trying to claim things that are owned by the county or the state. In terms of number of comments we received, draft version 3 is what I talked about in December. So we had 16 commenters. Some of those were actually groups of commenters of people who commented, but submitted them as one. And then on this version 4 that went out as red line, we actually publicized that just to the people who had previously commented. But we got additional comments from 6 individuals or groups, and actually got still a fair number of comments, like distinct commenting on this bullet or this requirement, that sort of thing. All right. There's a big 4 of things that got commented on, and this is one of them, the lot grading plan. And this is going to look nearly identical to what you saw in December. There's just been some tweaks, but as a recap, the lot grading plan is intended, it's only required for the small projects that get an exemption from the full stormwater requirements. So this is generally properties under either a half acre for commercial or an acre for residential. So it's most going to apply to infill residential housing. And so the idea is to address what, one of the most frequent complaints the city gets is, hey, somebody tore down the house next to me and they're building a big new house or they're building townhouses and we're worried about the runoff. So this is intended to address that runoff from lot to lot. And so the requirements only apply when greater than 800 square feet of impervious is being added. So basically somebody could add a shed and they're not going to have to do this. And in most cases, they could add a deck. But if they're adding a very large addition or building a new house, these things would apply. I'm actually going to flip to this next summary of it. Basically, it's saying you've got some options of where you're discharging any concentrated flow. So concentrated flow being that comes out of a downspout, a pipe, or through a swale. And you can take it to the right of way. You can, if there's a stream on the property, as long as the buffer rules are followed, you can discharge it to the stream. If there's an existing pipe or swale, it can be discharged to that. What we frequently see are cases where there's just sheet flow under existing conditions between the lots. There's no pipe or swale. And so there's several options. The first one is flow to a vegetated area, and it has to meet some specific requirements. Those include that it has to be at least 10 foot of length. it has to be sloped no steeper than 8%, because the idea is that there will be water infiltrating into the ground. So if you're in a infill neighborhood and the house is set back 5 feet from the property line, this might not be an option. But we also see infill houses that are larger, maybe a 1/4 acre lot, that might be an option. The next thing is what we're calling a surface infiltration pit. So the downspout would have to come out to the surface, but basically a gravel pit could be built that the water flows into. The reason that it's not a traditional dry well is because of some rules from the state that if the downspout went directly into the gravel, it would be considered an injection well. And we don't want to deal with that permitting. We don't think that home builders want to deal with that permitting. So that's why the surface discharge to the surface is required. We have also included rain gardens and not fire retention SCMs. We're actually looking at rain gardens with the same design requirements as the Raleigh Rainwater Rewards program. So it would provide, all of these are intended to provide some place for the frequent rainstorms to go. It's not going to address the 100-year storm, but it's going to address the nuisance flooding issues. And then the final option is one that we got a lot of pushback on, but now it's just one of many options, which is to obtain an easement from the adjacent property owner. So if a new house is being built, they want to take all the downspouts, collect them in one place and discharge them at one point. If they get permission and an easement from the adjacent owner, they could do that. So lot grading plan is one of the big four. I'm going to get to the other 3 in a minute. We've had the largest number of changes incurred in chapter 4, which is about conveyance design. We've been refining where exactly there does the transition from publicly maintained to privately maintained pipe occur. And so that refinement is reflected in this chapter. So basically, if it's in the right of way, and there's a little exception for small pipes, but if it's 15 inches and bigger and it's in the right of way, it has to meet the right of way roadway standards. There's a lot of updates related to the specifications for how concrete and plastic pipe have to be certified, how they have to be joined. We've been getting feedback from the American Concrete Pipe Association, which is an industry group. We've also been getting comments from ADS, which is a manufacturer of plastic pipe. So the concrete and the plastic pipe people have been weighing in on this and keeping each other in check because they have competing business interests. But we will accept their technical knowledge any day. We've also had a change in minimum height cover based on feedback from our maintenance staff. We have removed the minimum velocity because we actually have a minimum slope, which essentially gets to the same thing. And then we're doing some additional clarifications on when are inspections required. And I would say in general, that is staying consistent for publicly owned pipes. And it's a little less stringent for privately owned pipes. So for example, if an apartment complex was at the top of the hill, the pipes just within their parking lot would not have the same standard as the ones in the right of way. We've also, this is something I believe we gave a heads up about in December, but we have clarified in draft B5, which is that we are going to require more public drainage easements than we have under our current rules, which means it will be clear that the city maintains the pipes that convey public runoff. Potentially, this will save the city money in the future when we have drainage complaints or need to perform maintenance, that we would already have the easements and not need to purchase those. So, I think the reality is that we, under the drainage assistance program, have a responsibility towards these pipes, and so we're getting that up front and getting the easements as part of the design. That's similar to what Raleigh Water does with water and sewer utilities. The second piece is tied to the downstream discharge easement. So you may recall, we've talked about situations where there's an undeveloped property upstream of developed areas or homes. And if the upstream property comes in for development and it's not clear where they're going to place their flow, how is it going to get through the houses or the other development that exists downstream? And so as part of the manual process, we're requiring that they obtain an easement from the downstream owner. That's gotten a fair amount of pushback, however we believe it's needed. But one thing we're doing that will help with that pushback and help in the future is that we're requiring, when the downstream property develops, that they create an easement that goes up to the upstream property that is not yet developed. And this is in line with what Raleigh Water does for water and sewer. We're actually not making them build the infrastructure to the property line, just dedicate the easement. All right, so now we get to our other notable outstanding comments. And one of these is regarding how many inlets are required on a road. And there's several factors that come together to dictate that. One is what design storm is used. So how much rainfall is it considered? One is, do we require some assumption about clogging of grates happen? And then another issue is that we are, based on recommendation from our maintenance folks and from other folks in the industry, we are moving towards using a DOT standard inlet rather than the city's standard inlet, which means that the inlet opening is getting smaller. So it's going from, say, I don't know, it's like 5 or 6 feet to, I believe, 3 feet. So something like that. So we've gotten a lot of comments on this. We are, over the next few weeks, going to do additional comparison between what we're proposing, what is in federal documents, what is in the DOT requirements. Basically, we've done comparisons before, but not looking at all these factors together. So that's what we're going to do. We've gotten some comments about pipe sizing. So hydraulic grade line can kind of be thought of as the water level in the pipe. And so what we currently do not specify, we just say it has to convey the 10-year storm, but we don't say where that water level has to be relative to the pipe. We just say it can't be above the ground surface. We are saying it needs to be below the crown of the pipe. That is a fairly standard thing. There are situations where that doesn't work. We're choosing to make it the standard that it needs to be below the crown of the pipe. There is the option for people to pursue a design exception from the requirements in the design manual, which gets evaluated through the plan review group and up to the engineering services director. And then the downstream discharge easement, kind of coming back to this, we have gotten pushback on that, but we believe we have addressed that through giving the lot grading plan options so that people could do the rain garden with the surface infiltration pit instead of doing the downstream discharge easement. And by requiring this upstream piece so that in an area that might be seeing a lot of developments coming in, the upstream developer wouldn't necessarily have to go purchase the easement because it would already be there. I'll stop there for a minute. Are there any questions at this point of the parts of the design manual I've brought up? All right,
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
On the downstream thing. You have that option, the 1 acre single families and the half acre. The grandfather lots, is that kind of what they're? they're currently
right,
grandfathered?
it's the ones in UDO 922A that fall under the exemption. Some people refer to it as TC2 because it was text change 2 in 2016.
If somebody comes. Townhome thing there. Those options are available, they have to go get them.
Correct. Right, so it's only the under half acre and under 1 acre that are even eligible for those alternatives. Like the idea being larger developments are going to have more flow. They need to pursue the downstream discharge. And I will say in many sites, that is not even an issue because they can connect into the right of way. And so it's not even an issue for the site.
Yes, if there's thought about any legal, board of adjustment or something. I know, that's what sites are sitting in Raleigh that are like that, but somebody goes through the whole process and somebody just won't give them the easement. Is the city comfortable with that approach?
I'll defer that to Wayne or Ben.
I mean, it's certainly possible. There's other alternatives that have been made available now, right? Like-
Well, yeah, but not on the big lots and the people with the legal firearms. That's the only thing. Back to the city. I don't know, is there another route?
Yeah, certainly we have been asked if the city would participate in obtaining easements and we have at this point said no.
Variance is always an option. Well, I mean, so variances, yes, that's a way through, it's gonna be part of the UDO, therefore variance is part of the process. Okay.
That would be an unusual situation in an unusual situation, but certainly it's possible.
Yeah.
It's the, that, because. Can't.
Okay.
All right, so in terms of the process, here today tonight, we plan to put the request for authorizing a text change before council on February 6th. We hope that council would then refer that to the planning commission text change committee, which their next meeting would be on February 21st. And then from planning commission text change committee, the earliest it could go to the full planning commission would be February 27th. It may go later than that. And likewise, the earliest it could go to city council would be March 5th, but again, it could be later than that. So when we've been asked, when will this become effective? We've said the earliest possible date would be May 1st, but that would be adjusted based on the timeline as it goes through the approval process.
And so, I mean, just within that schedule, maybe review the additional opportunities for public comment that would
Sure.
be available. There will be at least 2, right?
Right, so that version 5 will become the official public comment version. That's the design manual itself. There's also the accompanying text changes that are related to the manual. Those will also go on the web. And those can be commented on by the public, both through the planning commission, at planning commission meetings and when it goes to public hearing, as part of city council.
Take that offline too, sorry.
Yes.
Take that online too, sorry. And those are good complaints.
All right, so in terms of what we are asking of you is to entertain whatever discussion you would like. And then we are asking you to recommend that council authorize a text change.
discussion.
Just wanted to make a quick comment. I know it's hard to go over all the technical pieces, and I really appreciate you walking through all those. And it's definitely not my wheelhouse to think of all the pipe sizing and everything, but it's definitely interesting. Clearly a lot of work has gone into public outreach and getting all that feedback, and I'm sure a lot of those negotiations and conversations are a little bit challenging. So just want to recognize you and your team, and thanks for sharing with us. Thank you.
Any other comments? I also want to thank you, Sally, for all the hard work and the team for putting this together. I'm curious if you can reflect on the conversation between the last SMAC meeting. We had some public comments, and I know you spent a lot of time meeting with people. How did those conversations go in relationship to the engagement you had prior to the December SMAC meeting?
I think that the reason why you got people coming to make in-person comments at the December meeting was that they felt like the conversation wasn't finished and wanted to continue that before it got sent to council. And so I think we did accomplish that by pushing the date by a month. And I think that my understanding is we've had a chance to meet with anyone who requested a meeting, to walk through people's comments. Specifically, we had a follow-up meeting, or perhaps two follow-up meetings with the Homebuilders Association after the December meeting. And we're able to go through all of their comments on draft version 3. And we showed them basically what I just showed you of here's the additional comments, changes that we plan to make. I think that kind of that big four encompasses the areas where they still have concerns, but my sense is that we're at a place where I don't anticipate any of the commenters saying we need to trash this manual, like and start from scratch. That I think we've worked with people enough that it's something people can live with.
So it sounds like prior to December, really you were almost at an impasse, and now it's just more concern.
I wouldn't even say we were at an impasse. It was just the idea that there needed to be more conversation, more time going through comments. And yeah.
Okay. So may I have a motion that we endorse the staff recommendation to present the Stormwater Management Design Manual as revised to the council to request permission to initiate the formal UDO text change process. Daryl, give a second. Nicole, all in favor? Very good. Thank you. Ben.
So, Scott Brown from Cracker Joe, I'm going to put my name on the agenda. Feel Sally would be the best student.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer questions.
I said I was fine with presenting as long as he answered all the hard questions. So.
And I didn't, in fairness, he sent it to me and I didn't read it.
All right, so the reason we're here talking about example rezoning conditions is actually tied to the GSI action plan, which is something this group endorsed back in the spring of 2021. And one of the 6 actions, number 3, is that there should be a menu of rezoning conditions that that applicants for rezoning, that planning commissioners, that citizens, anyone could see. Here's some examples that I could, recommend or his applicants offer during the rezoning process. We actually have that was the impetus. We've actually broadened that effort a little bit to include not just green stormwater infrastructure, but other stormwater issues that come up during the rezoning process.
If I could just note, I think this is a conversation that is very fortuitous that Mr. Otwell is here to listen, because this will be issues that I think the liaisons between the planning commission and SMAC will have lots of discussions on, are the potential types of zoning conditions related to stormwater issues that are arising that that could potentially be voluntarily offered by the developer to address the concern. So I think this is a very good topic. I appreciate Mr. Otwell coming to listen to this.
Yeah, and actually this effort has been brought up with the planning commission in their infrastructure and mobility subcommittee, and was basically that we would be doing this. And we received some positive feedback about the fact that it was happening. I'm going to talk briefly about conditional rezoning versus general use rezoning. So if a parcel or group of parcels comes in for rezoning, they might go through general use rezoning, which means that, let's say they're rezoning from R4 to R10. If it's general use, then just what's in the UDO for R10 is what would apply. Some amount of cases go in that way, some amount go through conditional use, where there is conditions specific to that parcel or group of parcels that are applied as part of the rezoning process. Those conditions have to be offered by applicants, though and they typically address potential for negative impacts. Often during the rezoning process, there's a lot of unknowns about a site development plan. But so for example, you might address neighbors might be concerned about taller buildings. So the applicant might say that we're going to have this vegetated setback, or there might be concerns about increased traffic, and the developer offers a condition to add a traffic light or that sort of thing. So we sometimes see that there's the potential for negative impacts when there's higher density coming up in the rezoning process, which would create more impervious area than it was previously zoned for. And issues sometimes come up directly from the applicant, and they proactively bring forward a bunch of conditions. The staff report sometimes identifies places where the proposed rezoning is in conflict with the comprehensive plan policies. And then there's also issues raised by citizens and by elected officials and that sort of thing. So one of the things we thought about as we were starting this effort is what makes a good rezoning condition. So we want to directly address what the concern is. So if the potential negative impact is flooding in the Walnut Creek floodplain, we want to make sure the condition addresses that. If it's there was a case in the past couple of years where the concern was an endangered aquatic species. So we wanted to make sure that conditions addressed the aquatic habitat. The idea is that these are things beyond what's already required in the UDO. So if something is already required in the UDO, typically it does not become a condition. It needs to be quantifiable, and quantifiable in a way that's enforceable during the plan review process. And ideally, though you'll see in the examples, your mileage may vary, that a general audience could understand at least the scale of the impact. And so I'll give an example of a condition that was put in place a few years ago that perhaps was well-intentioned but didn't meet these criteria, which was that they would install 3 green stormwater infrastructure devices. So that's quantifiable in that it's 3, but for example, in theory, they could have installed 1 square foot of permeable pavement and that would have met that. So what we're looking for is a little more quantifiable in terms of benefit. And so in terms of selecting a condition, we look at what, we recommend looking at desired outcome, what type of action, and then actually getting into the weeds of what an example condition looks like to meet those principles. In terms of our desired outcomes, there's 5 here. These are, we've put forward these 5 desired outcomes based on common issues we see, but more importantly, by looking through the comprehensive plan policies and pulling out what has the city through the comprehensive planning process, the city and the citizens decided is important. And that, for example, is why improve water quality and implement GSI are up there separately, because there's actually a lot of comprehensive plan policies that are things like implement GSI, build sustainable sites, use environmentally sensitive design, use low impact development, and those are all can kind of be grouped together in the idea of implement GSI. So these are the 5 categories we looked at. I'm going to now go through example conditions. This type is enhanced erosion and sediment control during construction. And then up in the right-hand corner here is the outcomes that we're trying to meet. So, and I would encourage you to interrupt me with questions. With the desired outcomes of addressing localized flooding during construction and to protect streams during construction, there can be enhanced erosion sediment controls. So, for example, something we've seen as a condition, in fact, in reference to that endangered aquatic species I mentioned, was a requirement to stabilize, in that case, the stormwater control measures with sod, which stabilizes them faster and so reduces the time period of exposed soil. Another possibility would be to limit the acreage of exposed soil on a site during any one phase. That would especially apply to bigger sites. And then this last one, the city currently has some requirements for doing detention during the construction period, but there could be either greater controls offered, or those control the way the UDO currently reads, it's based on the size of the site, so that could be offered for a smaller site. Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance on this. Do we have in the UDO a limit on mass grading just in general, or is it typically conditional?
We do not currently have a limit, and I will refer that to Ben.
That's kind of where the current UDO requirements that are now controlling runoff, depending on how much you're disturbing. That's kind of where that came from, because back in the mid-2010s, we were pushing for kind of a runoff at one time. And that was kind of the compromise that was come to us. And while we're nervous about limiting how much you can open up at one time, if you open up more than like 15 acres, we have control for 4,500 showing. So that's kind of where that came from. I will say, because we were anecdotally discussing this yesterday over the presentation between Sal and Paul and myself, so you don't see all the sites now, we can kind of close the jury around, and I see kind of bar different model. Take that for its worth.
That works as an interesting deterrent for folks who want to do more. If people want to do mass grading, they have to make pretty big sediment ponds to accommodate like the.
Yeah. Erosion just a second. Yes.
Other comments or questions on this during construction type.
I guess I have one more, sorry.
Yeah.
Is flocculant ever something that folks bring forward in conditions, use of flocculant for sediment erosion control?
That is not something we've seen brought forward to date, but it could be a condition.
I know that's something that Durham just introduced in their UDO, but they're dealing with different soils there for the most part, but yeah, just wondering.
No, what, yeah, because they are looking at it. Well, they do have it for Triassic soil area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have some of that soil type in Raleigh, it's just more closer to that's on. Yeah, so the same as something as well.
All right, so the next type of condition I'm going to talk about would address localized flooding. So not things that are coming from, say, the main stem of Crabtree or Walnut Creek, but might be more neighborhood issues, which would be to offer additional discharge controls. So currently, the city requires control of the 2 and 10-year storms for all the development sites that don't get the exception for being under an acre or under a half acre. And so there could be, we have seen sites offer to provide controls for the 25-year. The UDO language in terms of at every point, though we have seen people offer, if there was flooding concerns in one direction off their site, we've seen it offer a 25-year control for the flow to the north and not for the flow to the south. Then the next category is additional water quality treatment, and these potential conditions really get at instances where a site might not have to provide on-site controls or might have to provide limited controls. So this first one, actually, we don't require existing impervious area to be treated, but that could be offered as a rezoning condition that the site could say, well, we're going to treat 50% of our existing impervious area, which would be above and beyond what is in the UDO. The second one, this is where your mileage may vary, is a little Byzantine, but basically what it boils down to is that right now our UDO says if the percent impervious on the site is going to be more than 24%, they have to provide an on-site SCM. But if it's say only 20%, they don't have to provide an on-site SCM. They can do nutrient buy down only. And so this is a project could offer to provide on-site controls, which would help Raleigh streams rather than the nutrient offsets going on in somewhere else in the nation's watershed.
Make one comment on that one too. Just the first bullet for clarification. The city is not legally allowed to require treatment of existing impervious area. But as part of rezoning process, should the developer offer that voluntarily, then it would be enforceable just as if it were a requirement. So that's one that can provide a lot of benefit for a redevelopment site that has the existing impervious area on it.
All right, the next one, we're getting to where we started, which is in green stormwater infrastructure treatment. So I just want to highlight how many desired outcomes this meets. So this could address some localized like nuisance type flooding. It meets the goal of implementing GSI. It can protect streams and improve water quality. So should we have put a fair amount of thought into how to write these, because we have seen previous conditions where I mentioned the one of, we'll install 3 GSI devices. We've also seen we'll install 2,000 square feet of permeable pavement, which is quantifiable, but doesn't get to how much of this site is being treated? Is this, you know, a drop in the bucket? Is this a meaty commitment? It doesn't really get to that. So we're actually recommending that it be based on a percentage. Because that can be understood of, hey, they're committing to this percentage doing this further treatment. So this first one is actually written, so a site would have to do water quality treatment, and this would be, okay, they're saying this percentage of my water quality treatment on site will be done with green stormwater infrastructure. So that might be instead of an underground practice, or instead of a wet pond, or something like that. Because we've specifically said through a volume control measure, so that would be through infiltration or rainwater harvesting. And it would get the multiple benefits from green stormwater infrastructure, like habitat and addressing urban heat islands and all the auxiliary benefits. The second one is basically, let's commit to, you know, if somebody was committed to doing GSI where there's existing impervious area, they could commit to treating a percentage, the first inch of runoff on it from existing impervious. So that's similar to what was on the previous slide of, and what Wayne mentioned, that we can't require treating existing impervious, but an applicant could offer that. I'll pause again and see if there's any questions on the past couple slides.
First comment. Make sure I understand, that's, there's requirements for one measurement site. Is this over and above, or is this inside the required?
It's inside the required. So,
Yeah.
so they're basically be saying, maybe they were going to do a wet pond, but are now saying, well, 50% of it I'm gonna do as GSI, so I'm gonna do bioretention, permeable pavement or something like that.
Good point. So they're still meeting regulatory requirements, but there are advantages to meeting regulatory requirements using GSI versus more gray infrastructure.
I guess the maintenance and management of that. But I like it, just curious how it's function. Process.
And we actually have seen some version of this offered previously, that, you know, some percentage of the water quality volume would be done with GSI.
Case, right?
Yeah, and actually, in Fairwood case, that was where, yes, their last iteration of solid smoke, they were treat 50% of their impervious area is
These are all voluntary conditions. They don't.
Right.
They bring them to make their project more, acceptable. And we deal with this a lot, and there's a item that's very difficult to make sure you get what you want.
Yes.
But once you get the conditional use approved, they're moving forward with what they interpret as what was written, so it's an offer, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times lawyer writing this and.
That's right.
Hopefully they're checking their. Same with the planning department, they spoke to check with us.
And a lot of them are written last minute.
Yeah, I will say, I did have a site where not an engineer had written that they were going to infiltrate the 100-year storm. And I, in that case, advised them to offer something less than that, because that would be extremely difficult and probably not technically feasible to do.
Which is why these are worded with the X, right? Because we can't specify that percentage. But we also want to have the wording as carefully laid out as possible to meet the criteria established set of being enforceable, et cetera.
All right, we've got a couple more here. The next one is to increase stream buffers, and this is something we've seen offered previously. So I've seen this offered on specific streams or on all streams on the site. This top one just basically says you would extend the width of the buffer, but one of the problems with doing that is that it wouldn't necessarily say what are uses are allowed. So I actually really prefer this second one, which speaks to how it would be treated in reference to the use buffer rules, which would, in this example, I've said zone 1, which is the more restrictive of the two zones. So in zone 1, if there's existing forested area, you can't remove the forest. But it's important when somebody offers a condition that we know, would it be treated like zone 1 or zone 2, you could actually do grading. It has to remain vegetated, but it could be lawn or landscape.
Do you have to give a list of sample conditions for the applicants as well, or do you let them, you bring the condition to you and then wordsmith it back?
Well, that's actually that is why we are presenting this to you,
Okay.
is to get a list into the public realm. We do not have a handout for applicants, but the idea is that we could refer applicants to the meeting materials for examples.
Here, since they're all voluntary.
Right.
Yeah.
We're still step.
Yeah.
We want it accessible, but we want it not to be.
Yeah.
We will take them home.
My understanding is this process was used by folks who concerned about affordable housing to get some examples of conditioning into the public domain.
Is there any benefit to writing, or to specifying horizontal measurement, in there from the top of the bank rather than leaving it open to vertical measurement? Absolutely.
Yeah, we could do that. I'm sorry.
I'd recommend a little more definition of maintenance. It's not just once, but routine or regular, some descriptive about maintenance.
Okay, yeah, and I'd say we can do that. I can alter this first one to better reflect the second one where it's protection and maintenance of existing buffers, because that document does address that. Thank you, I appreciate that.
And you could maybe talk about sometimes when these are related to stormwater control measures, they would then fall under our annual inspection and reporting program requirement, right? Which then requires annual inspections and submittal of a report, that would, I think, maybe, at least in those cases, address that maintenance concern. Is that fair, Sally?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. It hasn't come up specifically related to buffers, but in terms of permanently protected undisturbed open space, which is a category people can use to help meet their nutrient requirements, that we do treat like a stormwater control measure and require an annual report. So if there are encroachments into that preserved area, that would get picked up on as a part of the annual inspection. All right, I've got two more. They're both related to floodplains, and so it's about preserving floodplains as one of the outcomes. This actually gets to the broad idea of implementing green stormwater infrastructure and building our natural systems so that we have preserved floodplains rather than gray infrastructure or pipes. So some of the examples would be to commit to the limits of disturbance would not encroach into the floodplain area. One that might be realistic for a broader number of projects is the second one, which would be to not alter existing grades in the floodplain, because that would allow a project to install a sewer line, but restore to existing grade. There could be no built upon area in the floodplain, and then this last one, so I would say that, for example, of the cases Ben talked about, Gorman Street is more like the second bullet, where they're saying they're not gonna do any fill, they're not gonna build any buildings or anything vertical in the floodplain. Trailwood is more like this last one, where they are planning to do some fill, but they're doing a study to say there'll be no rise in flood elevations, and they're not pursuing a letter of macro vision, which is a FEMA process to change the regulatory floodplain elevations.
Could you just describe what are the existing floodplain rules in the UDO? I know we've got restrictions on 100-year floodplain, but I always get confused what exactly is allowed and what isn't.
Yeah, so, and it varies based on how the floodplain was delineated. So there's the most stringent rules apply to the FEMA floodplains, which is FEMA typically is delineating floodplains for an area where the drainage area to the stream is a square mile or greater. So, well, it's really only the biggest streams that are in FEMA floodplains. For those, we've said, I'm trying to think of the best way to summarize this. I'm going to take it over to Ben.
So for, the industry, if you have vacant lots that are in the new floodplain, we restrict development on any part of that floodplain. We don't want to add any fill or anything like that. If you're a developed lot, then we restrict that fill or blockage to 50% of the floodplain area that's on your lot. So for the other floodplain, it could be drainage basins or floodplain studies they can do based on floodplain soils and things like that. You get floodplain soils later talked about a lot in say Raleigh County. They can still fill up that 50%. So FEMA vacant is like a most restricted. So that's why I have one case that thought that they're like they were going to study more Greek basically to look at doing anything in the floodplain. So if that would be possible. But if they were developed, they would be allowed to fill up 50% of that.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, and I think one of the nuances there is that, so we've made it basically much harder to develop in the floodplain, but we haven't said, our rules don't say you can never, ever develop in the floodplain, because there is processes of studies they could go through. And so part of having the potential conditions is an applicant committee. We aren't going to go through that process. Then we have some other, this actually gets to what Ben was saying in terms of these would mostly apply to things upstream of the FEMA floodplain, which are delineated by processes other than the FEMA studies. Or it could apply to previously developed lots in the FEMA floodplain, where we do allow 50% of the footprint to be covered with something, whether it's building or that sort of thing. And so an applicant could commit to limiting the fill placed on the lot or limiting the total disturbance, even if they're not proposing fill. They could say, we're not going to encourage more than 10% of the floodplain on this lot. Any other questions or comments about the floodplain topic? All right, so really, we've been doing this as we went, which is to discuss and bring forward any recommendations or changes that this group has. I would propose that we make the changes that were discussed today and put it in the packet for your next meeting.
Good.
I just want to say thank you. I think this is going to be a really helpful tool. for the public, but, you know, I think also for our decision makers who are trying to, you know, decide on some of these more, difficult projects and decide what would make them a little more appealable. This is gonna be a really helpful tool, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sal. Is there any other business? All right, and may I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, Luann, yeah, second is all in favor? We got one dissenter. See you in February.